Melissa Carter never imagined that buying the smallest house in Maple Grove would turn her into the neighborhood's favorite target. The white-painted bungalow sat at the very edge of the subdivision, squeezed between two oversized luxury homes with perfectly trimmed hedges and expensive SUVs parked in their driveways. It wasn't much, but after years of working double shifts at the hospital and surviving a brutal divorce, it was hers. And more importantly, it was safe for her 8-year-old son, Noah. The first morning after moving in, Melissa stood outside with a coffee cup in hand, while Noah rode his bike in circles across the driveway. "Mom, look, no training wheels. You're gonna crash into the mailbox," she laughed. But before Noah could answer, a sharp female voice sliced through the calm morning air. "Children aren't allowed to ride bicycles in driveways before 9 a.m. Melissa turned. A tall blonde woman wearing expensive sunglasses stood across the street, with her arms folded tightly across her chest. Perfect makeup, perfect clothes, perfect smile that somehow felt cold. "I'm sorry," Melissa asked. "The HOA regulations," the woman replied. "Section 12, noise disturbances." Noah slowly stopped pedaling. The woman extended her hand. "Angela Whitmore, Neighborhood Committee." Melissa forced a polite smile and shook it. "Melissa." Angela's eyes drifted across the small house with visible judgment. "Oh," she said softly, "you're the single mother who bought the foreclosure." Melissa instantly felt the sting hidden beneath the words. "Excuse me." Angela smiled wider. "Nothing, welcome to Maple Grove." Then she walked away. Melissa watched her disappear into the massive brick mansion across the street. That night, the first HOA violation letter appeared in her mailbox. "Grass height warning." Melissa stared at it in disbelief. The grass wasn't even long. 2 days later came another. "Trash bin visible from street." Then another. "Windows CRTNS not HOA approved." Another. "Child's TOIS left outside." Another. "Parking misalignment." Every single week, a new complaint appeared. Sometimes 2. Sometimes 3. At first, Melissa tried to cooperate. She cut the lawn, bought new curtains she couldn't afford, moved Noah's basketball hoop, repainted her mailbox. But nothing stopped the letters. And every time a complaint appeared, Angela somehow happened to be watching from across the street. One afternoon, Melissa came home exhausted after a 14-hour hospital shift and found a bright orange notice taped directly onto her front door. "Final warning." She ripped it down angrily. Noah stepped onto the porch holding his backpack. "Mom, are we in trouble again?" Melissa forced a smile. "No, baby." But Noah looked terrified. "Are they gonna make us leave?" That question shattered her heart. Because deep down, she didn't know. Inside the HOA office, Angela sat comfortably beside the board president, Richard Holloway, while reviewing violation photos. "She's lowering property values," Angela said casually. Richard nodded while sipping coffee. "She's behind on 2 fines already." Angela smirked. "Then push harder." Richard hesitated slightly. "She's a nurse and a single mother." And Angela replied coldly, "Rules are rules." But the truth had nothing to do with rules. Angela hated Melissa for a completely different reason. 3 months earlier, Angela's husband Brian had helped Melissa carry moving boxes during the first week she arrived. That was all it took. Angela noticed the way Brian smiled while talking to her. Not flirtatious, not inappropriate, just kind. But Angela had spent years controlling appearances, controlling neighbors, controlling her marriage. And Melissa's existence threatened that control. So she decided to destroy her quietly, one complaint at a time. Weeks turned into months. The fines climbed higher. $50, $100, $300. Melissa started losing sleep. At work she made mistakes she normally never made. One night her coworker Denise pulled her aside. "You okay?" Melissa nodded weakly. "Just tired. You look terrified." Melissa finally broke. "It's the HOA." Denise blinked. "The neighborhood people. They keep fining me for everything. I can barely pay rent." "You own the house." "Barely, and if I miss more fines they can place a lien on it." Denise stared at her in disbelief. "That's insane." Melissa laughed bitterly. "You know the worst part." "What?" "My son thinks we're gonna become homeless." Back in Maple Grove, Angela continued escalating things. She began photographing Melissa's property daily, sometimes secretly from inside her car, sometimes openly from the sidewalk. One afternoon, Noah accidentally left his bike near the curb for less than 20 minutes. By evening, another violation notice appeared. Unauthorized storage in public view. Melissa stormed across the street. Angela was watering flowers when Melissa arrived. "Are you serious?" Melissa shouted, holding the letter. Angela calmly continued watering. "You're yelling. You reported a child's bicycle. It violated community standards. He's 8 years old." Angela finally looked at her. "And this is an upscale neighborhood." Melissa's face flushed with anger. "You've targeted us since the day we moved here." Angela tilted her head. "Maybe you simply don't belong here." Silence. Heavy silence. Melissa stepped closer. "I work harder in 1 week than people like you work in a year." Angela's smile vanished. "People like me. You know exactly what I mean." For a split second, pure hatred flashed across Angela's face. Then she leaned forward slightly. "If you can't afford Maple Grove, perhaps you should leave before things get worse." Melissa froze. The threat felt real. Very real. That night Melissa sat alone at her kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid HOA notices. Noah slept upstairs. The house was silent, except for the ticking clock on the wall. Melissa rubbed her temples and whispered, "I can't do this anymore." Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Instead she answered. "Hello." A man's voice spoke quietly. "You need to stop paying the fines." Melissa frowned. "Who is this?" "Someone trying to help you." Her stomach tightened. "What?" "The HOA is corrupt." Melissa sat upright. "What are you talking about?" "The complaints against you are fabricated." "Who is this?" "You need proof." The caller hung up. Melissa stared at the phone in shock. The next morning she found an envelope taped beneath her mailbox. No name. No return address. Inside were printed documents. HOA financial records. Violation reports. Photos. Receipts. Melissa's hands trembled while flipping through the pages. And then she saw it. Dozens of fines issued to homeowners had been quietly erased. Except hers. But that wasn't the worst part. Several payment records led directly to Angela Whitmore. Private transfers. Cash reimbursements. Special exemptions. Melissa whispered, "What the hell?" Suddenly, Noah yelled from upstairs. "Mom, someone's outside." Melissa rushed to the window. Angela stood across the street, staring directly at the house. Watching. Almost like she knew. Melissa quickly hid the documents. Her heart pounded violently. That night, another envelope appeared, this time containing a USB drive. Melissa plugged it into her laptop cautiously. Security camera footage loaded onto the screen. The timestamp showed HOA office archives. Melissa watched Angela enter Richard Holloway's office after hours. Then the audio began. Angela's voice. "You promised you'd get rid of her." Richard sighed. "These violations won't hold forever. Then create new ones." She could sue. Angela slammed something onto the desk. "You owe me after what happened with the reserve funds." Melissa froze. "Reserve funds?" Richard's voice lowered nervously. "Keep your voice down." Then Angela said the sentence that changed everything. "If Melissa starts asking questions, we expose her medical debt and bankrupt her." Melissa's blood ran cold. "How do they know about my debt?" she whispered. Suddenly, another realization hit her. Someone inside the HOA had illegally accessed private records. Melissa immediately called Denise. "You need to come over." An hour later, Denise watched the footage silently. "Oh my God." Melissa paced anxiously. "They know my finances somehow." "That's illegal." "I know." Denise paused. "You need a lawyer." Melissa shook her head. "I can't afford one." But Denise looked strangely calm. "My cousin can." 3 days later, attorney Daniel Reeves sat inside Melissa's living room, reviewing every document carefully. The deeper he looked, the darker his expression became. "This isn't just harassment," he said quietly. Melissa folded her arms nervously. "What is it?" Daniel looked up. "Fraud, selective enforcement, privacy violations, potential embezzlement." Melissa stared. "Embezzlement?" Daniel nodded. "Your HOA reserve account is missing nearly $200,000. Melissa's eyes widened. "What?" "And based on these records, Angela and Richard covered it up by aggressively fining certain homeowners to compensate." Melissa slowly sat down. Her entire body felt numb. "All this because she didn't like me." Daniel looked serious. "No, it's worse than that." He slid another document across the table. "This neighborhood was already under quiet investigation before you moved in." Melissa read the page carefully. Then she saw it. A state inquiry into Maple Grove HOA finances. Open but inactive. Her breathing quickened. Daniel leaned forward. "I think they targeted you because they assumed a struggling single mother wouldn't fight back." Across town, Angela sat inside her dining room sipping wine when Richard called. "We have a problem." Angela frowned. "What now?" "I think Melissa hired an attorney." Angela nearly dropped her glass. "How?" "I don't know." Angela's expression hardened instantly. "Then pressure her harder." Richard sounded panicked. "You don't understand. If she files discovery requests." "She won't." "You sound very confident." Angela stepped toward the window and looked directly at Melissa's house. "She's weak." But for the first time, Angela was wrong. The following week, Melissa received another violation notice. Property appears neglected. Instead of panicking, Melissa smiled. Then she handed the letter directly to Daniel. "Perfect," he said. "Why?" "Because now they're creating retaliation evidence after legal representation." Melissa finally felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Soon Daniel filed official requests demanding HOA financial transparency. Panic exploded behind closed doors. Richard began deleting files. Angela started calling board members late at night. Several residents suddenly discovered years of hidden fines and selective punishments. Rumors spread rapidly across Maple Grove. Then came the neighborhood meeting. Nearly every homeowner attended. Melissa entered quietly beside Daniel, while whispers filled the room. Angela sat confidently at the front table, wearing a white blazer and cold smile. Richard looked nervous. Very nervous. The meeting began normally. Budget discussions, landscaping updates, pool maintenance. Then Daniel stood up. "I represent Melissa Carter." The room immediately fell silent. Angela's jaw tightened. Daniel calmly placed several folders onto the table. "We've uncovered evidence of selective enforcement, fraudulent violations, financial misconduct, and unauthorized access to private homeowner information." Murmurs exploded across the room. Richard turned pale. Angela interrupted sharply. "These accusations are ridiculous." Daniel ignored her. He connected a projector. Then the security footage appeared on the wall. Angela's face drained of color instantly. The entire room watched her threatening Richard inside the HOA office. People gasped. Someone whispered, "What the hell?" Then Daniel displayed financial transfers, hidden reimbursements, deleted fines, missing reserve funds. One homeowner suddenly stood up angrily. "You fined me $900 over my fence while you people were stealing money." Another shouted, "You threatened foreclosure on us." Chaos erupted. Richard tried speaking, but homeowners screamed over him. Angela stood abruptly. "This is being manipulated." Then Melissa finally spoke. "Calm. Controlled. Dangerously calm. You terrorized my son." The room quieted slightly. Melissa looked directly at Angela. "You made an 8-year-old afraid he'd lose his home because you were jealous." Angela's eyes widened. "That's not true." Melissa stepped forward. "You watched my house every day." Silence. "You photographed my child." More silence. "You illegally accessed my financial records." Angela's composure cracked. "I was protecting the neighborhood." "No," Melissa replied softly. "You were protecting yourself." Daniel then revealed the final piece. A bank statement connecting Angela directly to missing HOA reserve funds through a shell landscaping company, owned secretly by her brother. The room exploded. One elderly resident shouted, "Call the police." Richard buried his face in his hands. Angela looked completely frozen. For the first time in years, she had lost control. 2 weeks later, state investigators raided the HOA office. Financial crimes surfaced immediately. Richard accepted a plea deal. Several board members resigned. And Angela Whitmore. She was arrested for fraud, conspiracy, and financial misconduct. News vans lined Maple Grove's entrance for days. Residents who once avoided Melissa now waved warmly when she walked outside. One afternoon, Noah rode his bike freely down the street, while neighbors smiled instead of complaining. Melissa sat on the porch watching him. Then Brian Whitmore quietly approached from across the street. Angela's husband looked exhausted. Ashamed. "I'm sorry," he said softly. Melissa nodded once. "I know." Brian glanced at the empty mansion behind him. "She destroyed everything." Melissa looked at Noah laughing in the street. "No," she said quietly. "She tried to destroy the wrong people." Months later, the HOA elections brought entirely new leadership. Most violation policies were removed. Families started talking to each other again. Children played outside without fear. And Melissa. She finally slept peacefully. One evening Noah sat beside her on the porch swing and asked, "Mom, yeah, are bad people always punished?" Melissa thought for a long moment, then smiled gently. "Not always." Noah frowned. Then why was she? Melissa looked at the sunset, glowing across Maple Grove. "Because eventually," she whispered, "cruel people get too comfortable hurting others." Across the street, Angela's mansion sat dark and empty. Foreclosure notice hanging directly on the front door. The same humiliation she once tried forcing onto Melissa. Only this time, everyone saw it.